Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome. Welcome to all of our alumni tuning in. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Gregory Leperati. I'm Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Baruch. Welcome. Thanks for being here this evening. I would request that everybody, a few ground rules, if they could just mute their microphones. You can leave your camera on if you'd like. We'd love to see your smiling face in the camera throughout the presentation. But please mute your microphone so we can focus on our speaker this evening. Put all your questions throughout the presentation into the chat bar, and we will answer them as we go along. And then at the end, we will have a dedicated Q&A portion. So we will definitely answer as many questions as we can this evening. That being said, I'd like to get into introducing our speaker. Our presenter today is Lisa Panarello. She's the founder and CEO of Careers Advance. Now, she herself is a Baruch alumna, and she's got over 15 years of corporate experience in marketing, advertising, sales operations, project management, you name it. She's a leading career coach, trainer, educator, and speaker. Her programs have reached 500,000 people nationwide, and she's crafted over 2,000 resumes and digital profiles for clients. We are really pleased to have Lisa with us, and we've loved collaborating with her for webinars over the last few years. And without further ado, I now introduce Lisa.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Sydney. Really, always such a great introduction. I'm excited to be here with all of you today. We have so many alumni, my Baruch family on the call. I'm going to jump right in. I want to get started because we have a lot to cover, and I want to leave a lot of room for your specific questions. So I want to begin with just a few stats, really on the job market. Just a month ago, just May 2020, the leisure and hospitality industry recovered 1.2 million jobs. In that same time frame, the construction employment rose by 446,000 new jobs. Healthcare jumped up 312,000 new jobs. And retail added 368,000 new jobs. There's strong job recovery and gains being made in other industries too, like manufacturing, professional services, wholesale, and even the government. And the reason I share these details is because I want us to understand that there's a good reason to be on this call today. I know the unemployment rate is still a bit high, different than what it was back in the end of last year, but the employment market is rising. And there are more jobs opening than were expected, and there are more job openings that are expected. And that is good news. Some of you will find opportunities in your chosen industry, and some of you may need to pivot, but either way, that means interviews are coming. And the tide is changing a little bit, meaning that many interviews are being conducted virtually. In fact, in a survey last year revealed that 47% of employers who were polled say that they use video interviews in their recruitment process. And obviously that trend has ticked up in recent months, sure, for safety, but for other reasons too. Convenience, cost savings, time savings, and that's for both sides of the table, especially the candidate. I mean, think about what it takes to get to and from anywhere these days. So let's get a handle on mastering that virtual interview. Now, in virtual interviews, well, actually in any interview, there are always three phases: the before, the during, and the after. And that's how we're going to break up today's program. I'm going to focus on preparation. We'll discuss critical steps to take before the virtual interview. Then we're going to dive into engagement, discuss how to best conduct yourself during a virtual call. And lastly, and most importantly, is follow-up. I want to cover some tips on how to stay virtually connected and in the running after the call. And like Greg said, if questions come up, please drop it in the chat. Greg, if it's germane to something I just shared, interrupt me. I'll address it then, and we'll certainly leave a good portion of our time at the end to address as many questions as we can. So, first up, preparation. I say get all your ducks in a row before the call. For instance, gather meeting information. You can get details that you need about the interview in advance. And it's a good thing to know that many HR folks and recruiters are doing more to help the candidate. I was just on a webinar a couple of weeks ago where we were interviewing two folks that are in a leading company that's a leader in virtual software for the interview process and the recruiting process. And they're expressed to us that recruiters and HR folks are doing more for the candidate. They realize how necessary and how beneficial it is to give the interviewee as much information as they can to make the process go smoothly. In fact, records show that 63% of job seekers say that they're likely to reject a job offer because of a bad candidate experience. And you're probably one of them. Companies learn that they need to make the interview process efficient and personalized. So leverage this. Reach out to your company contact for details. Beyond date and time of the interview, ask, what number should I call if we experience technical difficulties? Wouldn't that be good to know if you get dropped, right? I would also confirm the virtual software that you'll be working on. Is it Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Skype, etc.? Even find out if there's a password required. Like, don't overlook any of those meeting invite details. If you think something missing, you need clarification, ask. And I say go further. Ask about the people and the meeting structure. Ask, can you provide names and titles of those I'll be speaking with? Will we schedule separate one-on-one calls or have a group call? How long should I anticipate the call with each interviewer? These are not out-of-line questions. In fact, you can go even deeper. Find out about the meeting expectations. Will I be asked to show work samples? And if so, am I going to be able to share my screen? That'll let you know if you got to get your computer set up in a certain way. You could ask, will I be expected to demonstrate any job-related skills? Wouldn't it be great to know if you'll need to perform on the spot? Maybe do some web coding or editing, an accounting function or maybe solve a problem? Why be surprised? You can ask in advance. Some companies set up pre-recorded interviews, so that's where they send you a link for you to record answers to pre-selected questions. So if this is the case, you could ask, will I be given the questions prior so I may prepare a few thoughts? Is there a time limit once I hit start? Will I be able to re-record an answer if it got flubbed? So the whole point here about what to do before your virtual interview is to get as many details up front as you need to, so you could be as prepared as possible. Gather that meeting info, and then check out your attire. Select what you feel is going to work best for you. The easiest way, I believe, to think of attire is dress like it were an in-person interview. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Now that would mean a suit for most of us. And I realize some work cultures have relaxed a bit in the office, so you could even ask the interview if there's an attire requirement or expectation. But at minimum, pick out a collared shirt or blouse. A blazer does help to beef up your professionalism, and slacks. I'm saying to be professional from the waist up to the waist down. I mean, think about it. If you had to get up for any reason, you do not want to be caught in pajama bottoms, sweatpants, shorts, or even less. Your work from home meetings, this webinar that you're participating, it's not really a big deal. But for a virtual interview, it is. So treat it as if you were going to them in person in terms of how you dress. And last thought, and maybe I'm being a little bit too in the weeds here, but pick out your outfit several days in advance. You might find that you need to get it dry cleaned or do some ironing, or that you can't find your tie or what have you. I mean, the great thing is you might not have to wear heels or shoes to that bottom, but get your attire ready. It should be neat, simple, no crazy colors, and professional. With your meeting info and your attire ready, Now, what else do you do to prepare? Conduct some research. I cannot speak to this enough. I'm sure people have been drilling it in your brain for years, and yet sometimes we feel we kind of forget about it. We know how to get suited up outside, but maybe we forget to get suited up inside. It's critical to conduct some research. Employers actually expect you to have a solid understanding of the role that you're interviewing for, and a few details about their company and their industry in which they operate. I'm not suggesting that you have to study like it's the SAT or their MCAT, but a little research can go a long way in impressing an interviewer, because you can use a fact or two in your answers. That shows that you're prepared and that you're interested enough to have done some homework. I kind of look at interviews, virtual or otherwise, as if it was a meeting at work. We don't go to meetings at work empty-handed. We go with information that we know we're going to be talking about. So do some research, and you can actually bring it to your meeting. Good news is you can bring your information to your virtual interview too. You can have the job description in front of you. You can have printouts of the website, their website in front of you. You can have an article that you found in front of you. You can lay it out on your desk table wherever you're doing the interview, right? One thing I suggest is that you make some highlights so that your eye doesn't have to sort of travel all around. You'll know where it needs to go if you want to grab some information, right? Conduct that research. Last duck to get in a row is gather your proof. Not just information about them, but information about you. We've heard the word portfolio. You might not be using it in the traditional sense on the virtual interview, but you could have samples of your work that prove your skills, your experience, even your character. And even if you don't get to share it on screen, you can have it in front of you as a reference. Portfolio pieces are really great talking tools. They can aid you in recalling and in telling your story. Leverage them. So let's continue with our virtual preparation. Tech check. This probably sounds like an absolute no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many of us miss this step. Don't assume that what worked yesterday on your virtual call with your buddy at work will work today on screen. Do a check before every video call, especially an interview. Greg and I have hosted over 10 webinars together in the past 3 years. We still get on a call 30 minutes beforehand, before each one, including today. And I actually do a test run before I get on Greg and I's test run. I mean, it's a big saver in time because we're going to look at the video, the sound, the screen share, the functionalities. So get on your laptop's camera or your webcam, depending on what you're using, or your phone, and test your surroundings. Starting with lighting. This is huge, especially if you're using a room that you don't normally use, or if you're wearing glasses. Look at how bright the light is, or how dark it is. See if there's a glare. You just don't want folks to struggle to see you. You might need to make adjustments based on where your light is coming from and the quality. Me, for instance, my light comes from the right. I'm in my office, and I have a large window here, and I've got shutters. I have to close all of those shutters. Otherwise, I get this bright light beaming on the right side of my face. I also have to diffuse the ceiling fixture that I have because it's right above me. Otherwise, I get this bright light, like a halo on my forehead. If you saw it right now, you would see I've got a pillowcase up there with binder clips holding it on top to diffuse that light. Right, so set up the lighting that's going to be pleasing to someone's eye. Right? You might even want to check how the lighting makes you look on screen. I got to put a little makeup on because my skin often comes off almost ghostly and my eyes seem unpronounced. Listen, do what you need to do to spruce up your visual. against the best lighting that you can muster. Right? With the lighting checked, move on to your audio. First, make sure the system is connected to the right microphone you'll be using. Whether it's your headset, the webcam, or you've got an external mic, you got to set that feature on correctly. Excuse me. And then check how you sound. If the webcam is really low or tinny or maybe scratchy, you might need to plug in a headset instead, or vice versa. This may mean you either have to invest in a new webcam and you don't have to spend a lot of money on it, or maybe even borrow someone else's. So do a mic check way before the interview so you can give yourself some time to shift what microphone or what system you're using, or borrow it from someone else, right? And then check again a few minutes before the call. Because if you got a window that doesn't have a blind or something, you might have to reposition yourself so that lighting is not too harsh on you. Right? With your lighting and your audio set, fix up your background. What's behind you can work for you, or it can work against you. Now, I want to be clear here. It doesn't have to be state-of-the-art. It just needs to be clean, neat, and non-distractive. You don't want to have too much going on behind you that it's competing for your face. And personally, I would stay away from virtual backgrounds. They can look sometimes too artificial. Again, we're talking about for an interview here, not for your office meetings. This is more important, if I should say. They can look artificial, or they can vibrate on the screen when you move, if it's kind of trying to register you when you move. Right? It's better to have a white wall than have a distorted image. So when you're on that webcam, when you're doing a test, look at what's behind you. Maybe you have to temporarily redecorate. For instance, this plant is not normally here. I put it here to add a little color. You might have to reorganize a little bit, maybe take some of your extra personal items out of the room, literally just for this call, so that behind you is simple, non-distorted, and helps the viewers focus mainly on you. Two other minor visual details, but I think worth mentioning. Check your screen name. Make sure that whatever appears on there, it's not some sort of funny moniker or unrecognizable name. You can name your window, right? I've seen some fun stuff, so double check your screen name. And if you're using a laptop, I was just given this as a tip a couple of weeks ago I wanted to share with you, because I said to her, gee, are you using PC? Because she just had such a great visual on the positioning of her face. She said, no, I found out that it was a tip to put it on some books. Raise up your laptop on a few books so it doesn't look like you're looking down. Just a little tip to kind of help level your eye with your viewers. Right? One final check, tech check, speed and bandwidth. You can do an online speed test. Just Google it. How do I test my speed? There's all kinds of sites that will help you do that. And you can check out the video platform that you'll be using for the interview and find out what the minimum requirements are. Then you'll know if your speed is on target. And if you want to ensure the fastest speed and the most bandwidth, shut down all your devices in your home that are connected to Wi-Fi. Make sure no one else is streaming or doing any data-heavy activities on their computer, their TV, the phone, the tablets, while you're on the interview. In fact, you could be mindful of who in your home is going to be running a virtual meeting or a virtual class at the same time as your interview. So either A, you can schedule your interview around that, or ask your family to reschedule theirs, right? So keep that in mind before you actually schedule a call, or after, and then let your family, whoever's in that house with you, say, listen, we want to respect each other's space. I need this time and this bandwidth. Because the bandwidth, if you've got a lot of devices on, it's going to slow down your screen. You're going to have the little pauses or the screen freezes. You kind of want to minimize that, right?
Lisa, I wanted to just jump in for a second.
Yeah.
It's not a question from anyone, but I just wanted to chime in with a couple of points about the virtual background, since I've
Sure.
also done some looking into that. It's based on the RAM you have in your computer. So the more RAM you have, the better the background can look. And if your computer has any overheating issue or something happens in the interview, it could actually make the background start to look worse and degrade as the meeting goes on. So just a heads up that another reason virtual backgrounds aren't always great for an important interview is that it could have some deteriorating quality as the meeting goes on. And secondly, having worked in some video editing type stuff previously, I do know that when it comes to video or audio, a lot of people say that audio is always still the most important aspect of how you convey yourself. So if you have to choose between a state-of-the-art camera or state-of-the-art microphone, you probably want to pick the microphone, because the audio is important of how you're able to convey yourself to the person you're speaking with. If you have bad audio, that ruins everything. So
that's a great point, Greg. And we heard like a little glitch there. So for the same reason, you just kind of illustrated how that can happen. It can be something that's either with our technology. So,
yes. Yes, I just had a momentary freeze up, but yeah, go ahead, Lisa. You can take it away. But yeah, that just wanted to throw in those quick pointers.
No, it's a great point, and I wasn't aware of that in terms of the virtual background. That does take up memory. And by the way, these sometimes the virtual glitches that may happen could be out of our control. The ones that we can put in our control is doing the test check before to see how can we adapt the lighting, the sound, and the speed from the controls that we have to make it the smoothest as possible. Right? And do consider where your camera is too. So where your face, if it's being cut off, if it's too low. So you want to make sure you're positioning the camera or your laptop in a way that it's getting like a bus shot. Just like on LinkedIn, we don't need to show the whole you, but we want to make sure your face is the primary target for the interviewers. Right? And just sort of one more thought on technology. If you'll be interviewing on a platform you are not familiar with, or maybe that you haven't used in a while, I say explore a tutorial online. Get a little learning in there. Now, I'm not in no way, shape, or form am I a master at Zoom. I'm learning something new every time I use it. But prior to running my first webinar, I made sure I learned enough to run a decent meeting online. So again, if you're not really used to that certain platform that they're going to be using, talk to the recruiter, ask them a little bit details about it on the functionality, and then certainly look at an online tutorial to get a little familiar. Right? Just so it does not like your first rodeo, so to speak. Right? All right, so one final area on preparation. Limit your distractions. This probably sounds like another no-brainer, but add this to your interview checklist. There are so many little things around us that can just cause our brain to lose focus. So choose the quietest room in your house, preferably one with a door. Remove pets from that room. If you can put them in a quieter room and a closed door, great, so you don't hear the barking or the meowing or the bird chirping. Close your windows. I actually have a fan on now so I can keep the windows closed, because especially if a lot of you in New York, you've got all that traffic noise out there, you've got the clapping going on right now, you've got all kinds of ambient noise outside. So do your best to make it a quiet space. Now, if you happen to have a very small apartment and you have a big family living there, try borrowing a friend's pad for the hour. Or see if you can't go to the library. They often have spaces that you can reserve for free, right? And enclosed. Just call to book in advance, right? So that's another option if your home environment isn't really conducive to having a virtual meeting. Right? Secondly, another distraction, mute your phones, your cell phones, and yes, your landline. I still have a landline. It's a cordless one, because if I lose power, I can still, or have an emergency situation, I've got my landline. However, I have that cordless phone right now in another room with the door closed, so I don't hear the ringing of it. I mean, I went that far to get it out of my office. My cell phone, muted. Muted for texting, muted for calling, any of those dings and whistles, muted. You can certainly have your phone on, because if for some reason you lost connection, you had to call the interviewer, and you obviously call them with the number that you got in advance, right? you need your cell phone there. But make sure it's muted. You might want to have a little checklist before you have this virtual interview so you can make sure you're doing all these little things. And speaking of turning things off, turn off your email notifications. You can go to your email, click File and Options. You can temporarily turn off the sound, the ding when you get an email, and the pop-up when you get an email. Those can be very distracting. If you're not sure how to do that, just shut down email. We can live without the email for an hour, right? In fact, shut down all applications that you do not need to use for the interview. So if you know you're going to share your screen for a certain tool, then yes, you might have Word or Excel or PowerPoint open. Other than that, I shut down my LinkedIn, I turn off my, my money program, whatever ancillary apps that you have that aren't germane to your interview, shut them down. Do whatever you can to make your interview space a disturbance-free zone. Listen, one hiccup isn't going to destroy your interview, but several could. So wrapping up the preparation section, gather your meeting information from that recruiter. Get your materials ready, whatever you need, pen, paper, research, resume, etc. Run a tech check. Set up your proper lighting, do your background shifting, and limit your distractions. This may all sound like a lot of work, but interviews are normally nerve-wracking. So you can reduce some of this anxiety by getting your mind and your space perfect. And I know preparation won't guarantee that nothing won't go wrong. It just increases the chances of the best possible outcome. Now, once you're prepared, you are ready to engage. The moment you've been waiting for, contact. Well, virtual contact. Now, virtual interviews are much like in-person meetings. It's important to establish a rapport with the interviewers, whoever's going to be on that call. It's important to deliver an impactful message about your value online. And you certainly want to encourage them to move you forward in the process. So I just want to go over some body language basics to help you engage professionally and personally. Starting with posture, I know, no-brainer, but it's sometimes we don't realize that we're not sitting up straight. We do need to sit up straight. And I have a recommendation for this. I do this when I'm training, I'm out there training personally, is to sit in front of your chair, not in the butt seat. You know, that little indent in the middle that our butt naturally forms? Because when we're in that space, we kind of normally relax. If you push your butt, literally, to the front of the chair, you automatically sit up straight. Because your brain won't let you do this. You'll feel it more. So it helps to sit at the front of the chair so that you can have a good posture, which means you look engaged and interested. It makes a huge difference. Right? I also suck in my gut too. Pushes your diaphragm up, helps you sit up straight, kind of pushes your body over your spine, right? Cool. All right, so sit up straight in front of the chair and feet planted squarely so you look professional. When it comes to eye contact, when you're answering a question, attempt to look at the camera. When you're listening, you can look at the screen and the people's faces. But when you're answering a question, it helps to look at the camera. It makes it have like more of that direct eye contact. While I suggest that, I know it's not always comfortable and it's hard to remember that. I think folks are a bit more forgiving these days. As long as you look like you're looking at the screen versus way off or way up or way down, you want to have as best eye contact with those on the screen. In fact, I'm actually looking, I have my screen to the right where I have all of your faces, which I love seeing. This makes this webinar so much more personal for me. I can look down, I look up, so I feel like I'm looking at you, and the folks over there look as if you're changing your position based on who you're looking at. But if you can train yourself to look at the camera when you're speaking, it can help have a bit more eye-to-eye contact. Facial expression. We cannot forget to smile. I don't mean the unnatural smile all the time. That's crazy. They're going to wonder what you're drinking next to your screen, right? What I mean is occasionally smile and nod when they're speaking, because it shows that you're listening and you're understanding, and use your face to express your feelings and your emotions. I'm not
Lisa,
saying yeah.
We got a quick question. Someone asked in the photo used in the slide, there's someone waving. Is that a recommended tip to wave into the camera like that, or is that more illustrative, the one you have for the slide?
I'm so glad that they brought that up. I actually chose this because she's waving. When I'm coming into a meeting, I wave. We can't shake their hands. This is a way to say hi. It's a universal symbol for hi. So you can absolutely wave. Yeah, there you go, right?
Yep. Thank you.
And think about it. If they respond to that, you know your video is working. Just kidding. So yes, so using your facial expressions can really help you demonstrate your feelings, your emotions, and some of the words that you're sharing, and it doesn't make you look so still. If I talk like this the whole webinar, I mean, this is kind of a scary face, is it not, everyone? I know, sure. Well, thank you, Osmar, I appreciate that. This is why I was single for so long, you understand? I had to put on a little bit of a face. So check yourself in the mirror beforehand to check your look and your face so you know how it looks, right? It helps you show that you're real. Speaking of which, use your hands. I'm not saying you should wave down a plane, but it helps to, again, express your words and your feelings and emotions. I actually sit in a chair that has arms, and I find it helps because it's now at my elbows here at the level of my desk or my table. So it's more easily I'm more readily able to use my hands. If your hands are in your lap, it's got a long way to travel to come up into the camera. So if you can get a chair that has elbows, try it. So that you can use some hand gestures to emote. It makes a big difference to show that you're kind of human, right? Makes you feel real. And lastly, volume and pace kind of goes with this. You want to speak audibly and somewhat evenly. And what do I mean by this? You want to convey optimism without overpowering the conversation. But you also don't want to make it strained for them to hear you. Right? I do a test check before I do a quick recording of myself so I can hear how loud I might sound, so I might adjust my camera setting. And I know that I happen to be loud, so I work on adjusting my volume so I'm not overpowering. So depending on what your normal standard talk is, you might need to adjust that to show your exuberance and have a level pace where you're not rapidly firing through the whole call. So consider your volume and pace as something to adjust while you're speaking. Right? As for duration, a lot of times you wonder, how long am I speaking? How long should I speak? I suggest using 30 seconds to 2 minutes as a guide. It really kind of depends on the depth of the question. So for instance, tell me about a time when, can you describe when you handled a difficult customer? What was your biggest failure on the job and how did you overcome it? These answers surely can benefit from a detailed story, maybe even a situational example. So 1 to 2 minutes is certainly warranted. For other questions like, why did you choose Baruch College or your major? What did you like best about working at Verizon? Those kind of questions, brief is best. Stay tight. There's no reason to bring up your entire decision-making process around your college choice or describe every part of your journey in a past company. Now, if you are unsure as to how you come off, how you sound, or how long you're speaking, practice. You've heard of mock interviews, right? This is the perfect reason to do a mock interview because virtual interviews are still kind of new for us. So you can record yourself on Zoom. You can talk into the camera, say a few words, answer one of the questions you're expecting, record it, then watch it. You could have a mock interview with a friend on Zoom or even using your phone. I can't tell you, but a few minutes of self-viewing is the best way to see and hear how well you do, or where you need to make a tweak. You could use your phone that has a stopwatch feature to time an answer. So speak out an answer, do the stopwatch to time it. And then it'll help you, that kind of helps you get a feel for how long your answer is. You kind of get a mental connection to time, right? You know, I kind of realized that we're backtracking to preparation, but I thought it was worth mentioning here because practice has a lot to do with having a successful virtual interview engagement. Right? Posture, smiling, hand gestures, your volume, and your pace. It all matters on screen because it all helps to show your interest and your human side. And speaking of human side, if you're asked to do a pre-recording of an interview, look at the camera as if there's a human on the other side of it, because there is. So use the same body language techniques that we just discussed for a pre-recorded interview. Act like you're having an in-person conversation. I mean, right now, I'm not speaking directly to each one of you, and I'm using some notes. Yet, I'm using voice inflections, expressions, and hand gestures as if I were having a conversation with you in person. Right? So whether you're in person, whether it's a live video call, or it's a pre-recorded video, you don't want to come off stiff and immobile. I'm sure everyone on this call uses hand gestures and facial expressions and voice inflections when they tell a friend a story. Bring it into play into the virtual interview. And you don't want to look like a deer in the headlights the whole time with the same face in one position, right? Change it up. It's actually okay to look away from the camera once in a while. If you needed to pause to think about a question, you can do that. I wouldn't drop your shoulders and scrunch your face and look up like you're really searching for the truth. But you can look away, say, that's a great question. Use your brain to gather your thought and then come back in. That's natural. It's also okay to flub, make an error. Just don't apologize for it. You could say, excuse me, I got overly excited there for a moment. Let me rephrase. Or, excuse me, I'd like to go back to an earlier question for a moment. I wanted to clarify. If you remember that you said something you wanted to add to or tweak. Right? It helps you keep it real. And as for real, life can happen when you're on a call. So if something or someone interrupts your interview, don't panic. Just deal with it quickly and politely. Like you could say, I apologize. My daughter just slipped away from the babysitter. May I step away for one moment to settle her in? Thank you. Then you get up. Actually, you can stop your video and your microphone for that quick minute. Go do what you have to do. Come back. Now when the room is secure, get that video and that camera and that mic back on, and then resume. Thank you. You last asked me, repeat that question. Did you need more information on that? Or imagine your child literally opens the door to hand you something. I know a lot of people have kids at home right now. You could turn around, Justin, thank you so much. Oh, Justin came to hand me a folder I left in the kitchen. He's certainly been a great assistant these days. No need to apologize. Use the word excuse me, tackle the issue, come right back in. You can start it back with, so as I was saying, like you didn't miss a beat. Right? You know, minor interruptions, they can actually show how well you handle stress or how you can get back to focus quickly and that you have a sense of humor. Right? You know, we're not only being viewed for our smarts and our experience, but for our personality too. So let it come through the screen. And now let's take being human a step further. If you really want to be human, have a conversation, ask questions. That's the other side of the engagement. I don't like really tennis match interviews. They ask, I answer, they ask, I answer. It's kind of robotic. I'm not saying you're going to ask a million questions, but you could come to your meeting with a few high-level and even a few in the weeds questions that you can use in your engagement so you can have a conversation. It's the only way really people get to know you and get to like you, really. Now, questions that can help you get to know the role, the people, the company, and then you can use your skills and your research to set up the question. I'll give you a few examples. I see from your LinkedIn profile that you were in finance before. I'm curious what led you to take on a marketing role. It's okay to ask the interview a question about the interview, as long as it's about their professional background. You might ask, one of the aspects of this job is customer relations. Obviously, that shows you know about the job. I have honed partnerships with OEMs and government entities, which has led to significant business. I'd like to know what types of clients you would like me to bring on. That's selling yourself, selling your information about your knowledge of the job, and it allows you to ask a question to find out more deeper information about the role. You could ask a question about the company. I understand that XYZ company, your competitor, just launched a new software. I'm eager to know how your company is leveraging artificial intelligence in their next product phase and how I can get involved in that space. That's turning the camera on the interviewer, allowing them to give you some robust information about them, the role, or the company. You can ask impromptu questions too, just based on what they're sharing during the meeting. You bring 3 or 4 questions to the table that you want to ask and keep your ears open for others. Questions show that you are prepared, that you're listening, and that you're interested.
Lisa, we got an interesting question here. Someone asked, is it acceptable to message the interviewer an article relevant to the discussion during the interview?
Well, I might reference it. Say, I read in an article, and you can mention it, bring it up, ask your question, and then you could say, I'm happy to share that article with you if you like. That's probably the appropriate way to handle it. Messaging it during the meeting. First of all, you can risk losing connection with the camera and the video and the audio, and then you'd have to open up your email. I think it would detract from that moment, but you can certainly reference the article that you got your information from. You can look down, pick it up, tell them the name of the article, and you can offer to send it to them later. I think that'd probably be the appropriate way to handle it so you don't detract from your technology.
Yeah, and as long as there's context there, right? So you don't want to just randomly send an article. You want to make sure you've referenced it and alluded to the fact you want to send the article to the person, I guess, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'll actually bring up a point about that a little later. So good question there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So really, the questions really can help you develop rapport throughout this virtual engagement. You got your body language sewed up. You got your questions going on. You're having a nice, robust conversation. At some point, the interview will start to wind down the call. So just as with in-person meetings, this is your opportunity to ask about next steps. So close your call with a little forward action. For instance, I appreciate your time today. I'm really excited about being part of your next growth phase. So how do we proceed from here? You could even ask for the next meeting. Would it be possible to schedule a call with the director of finance or your marketing team, whoever you found out that you're going to be working with? You could ask for that meeting with those individuals. It's really a way to close that meeting with forward action. Now, for a pre-recorded interview, obviously you're not having a two-way street here. It's not a conversation. So you're not going to have an opportunity to ask a question and expect information back. However, you could end with a question of interest. So for instance, thank you for, let's say you're ending your video pre-recorded call. Thank you for letting me share my skills and experience. I'm excited for the opportunity to be part of your team. And I'm particularly interested to hear about your plans for expanding in the youth market. So I look forward to meeting you all in person. By the way, it's another way to sell that you know something about the company, right? So bring that information into that pre-recorded interview as well. Right? All that is helping to close with forward action. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we've reviewed critical steps of preparation and great strategies for engagement to make the virtual interview run as smoothly as possible and happen as humanly as possible. So once you've Clicked off the call, ended the meeting. It's time to follow up. And this is an area that I'm very, very passionate about. I suggest a 3 follow-up approach. The first step after a job interview, and I probably don't have to tell you this, is to send a thank you note. I mean, just consider it a rule. HR managers and the interview team actually read thank you notes. It shows that as a candidate, you are truly invested in the role and you're interested in working for the company. Good thing is that more than 94% of recruiters say it's appropriate to send a thank you email. Where years ago we were using snail mail, it's certainly accepted to use email today. And you want to do this within 24 to 48 hours. First of all, it's polite. Second of all, it helps them remember who you were and your conversation. And on that note, I strongly suggest that you say more than thank you. I mean, typical notes sound like this. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me about your XYZ position. I'm confident my skills will benefit your team. I look forward to working with your company. That's great. I mean, surely it's the gist of the thank you email, but instead of being canned and sort of template style like, take time to personalize your message. Your thank you email is actually an opportunity to market yourself, to resell your interest and your skills. So address something specific that the recruiter shared or the interviewer shared. Remind them of your relevant skills or clarify a point that you made. Right? You can mention a responsibility or a project that they discussed that your experience could benefit. It's kind of like restating your "why should I hire you" answer, but using information that you got from that virtual call. I'll give you an example. So this is how the email might sound. Dear Mr. Jackson, thank you for speaking with me yesterday. I appreciate your candor in describing the company's fiscal objectives and how important this project manager role is to reducing cost. See, you're referencing what they shared in that email. Now you move on to you. As we discussed, I have a record of negotiating with vendors successfully, and my problem solving and client services expertise will be a significant benefit during your upcoming merger. Since your production group is ramping up for next year, I'd like to meet the team to discuss the manufacturing challenges you mentioned and how it can be of strategic value from day one. I'm flexible next week, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. That is a much more robust thank you email, and it's more reflective of the conversation that you had. So personalize your message. Thank you notes can tip the scale in your favor against someone else who's sending the canned thank you email. And if you really want to stay in the running, follow up a second time 2 to 3 weeks later. But this time, add value to your message. This is where that article question came in. You can share an article that might be of interest or benefit to those interviewers. Maybe it's about industry news or about their competitor. Or maybe you're sharing an idea or a solution that you came up with. So I'll give you, for instance, good afternoon, Ms. Jones. I hope your merger is moving ahead smoothly. You're saying that because you haven't heard from them in a while, but you don't want to reference, I haven't heard from you in a while. I came across an article that reminded me of our conversation a few weeks ago. The attached references the supplier your team is considering. Paragraph 3 specifically addresses their capabilities. You may have seen it, but thought I'd pass it along. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. This is a unique way of showing the company that you're thinking of them versus just waiting around to hear back about you. A little extra effort can go a long way in setting yourself apart from that competition and really helping recruiters and interviewers remember you and your value. They are busy folks with lots of pressure. So on that next thank you email, add value. Then from there, if you have not heard back in say 3 to 4 weeks from your second email, and you're absolutely interested in the firm and the position, follow up one more time. That's it, one last time. But this time, pick up the phone. Change up your mode of communication. Let them hear your voice again. But like the first thank you email, don't be canned. Call with purpose. I'll give you some verbiage examples. Say you reach the receptionist. Hi, my name is Maria Santiago. Who am I speaking with? Hi, Jane. I spoke with Mr. Platt several weeks ago about their need for a new PM. He was particularly interested in my merger experience, so I'd like to discuss next steps. Is he available for a quick call? Think about that. First of all, you've referenced the receptionist by name, so now you can write his or her name down. You know who you spoke with. You've given him or her a specific reason why you called, and you referenced why the person you're trying to reach might want to pick up the phone. Versus, hi, I'm following up on my interview. I'd like to know if they've made a decision yet and when we're moving forward. I know that's the end game here, but come at it with purpose. Give them a reason to want to pick up the phone, right? In fact, if you reach the interviewer personally, or maybe you get their voicemail, you could say something like this. Hi, Miss Lee, this is Robert Flack. We had a great conversation a few weeks back about your need for a new PM to assist with capital initiatives. As you expressed interest in my merger experience, I'd like to continue our conversation how I can help reduce cost. It's almost another way of rephrasing that thank you email now, but on phone. Then you can ask them, do you have a moment to chat? If you reach their voicemail, I can be reached at, and give your phone number. This is actually an opportunity to reignite and humanize that virtual connection that you had several weeks ago. And sure, it will certainly pick their brain and remember, oh, I did speak to him or her, and set you apart from the others. Now, just a quick tip. Pre-type what you want to say. I do this because if I'm about to make a call, I get a little nervous. If they pick up the phone or I get an email, I can certainly get tongue-tied. So I type it out. I print it out and I can read from it just like I am now and still sound like I'm a human, right? So I don't ramble on the voicemail. Okay, we've covered some specific strategies for mastering the virtual aspects of each interview phase: preparation, engagement, and follow-up. I'd like to open up the floor to questions, Greg. What do we got?
Okay, so we had a question that came in about what are your thoughts on setting up the camera or iPad or whatever on a tripod and sit further out instead of sitting in front of the desk with the computer?
That certainly could work. It all depends on what kind of image you want to portray and what you think works best. I actually have had my webcam on a tripod behind my screen so I could have some distance. That one for me, I was too far away, but if you're at least giving yourself, like you want to make sure that you can be seen, and that you don't want to be really too far away. That's a bit too distant, but you can set it far enough away that they can at least discern your face and see a little bit more background. You can absolutely do that.
Another question that came in was, what about a thank you note to the HR person as well? Is that something you recommend?
I say, love the question. I say thank everyone at every stage of the interview. The person who first of all, calls you or emails you to set it up, you thank them, you set it up. After you have the meeting, I say send another email to the HR person that coordinated that meeting, for sure. Thank you so much for coordinating my meeting with so-and-so. It went really great. I shared some of these details. If you had any further information or questions, please contact me. And then send a separate email to everyone that you interviewed with. Oh, unless you have a group email. If you have a group interview, then you can do one interview and name each of the folks in the meeting. If you had individual, then you want to send individual thank you emails. And I suggest most of it may sound the same, but make sure there's a little something different in each, so you're referencing that particular individual.
Do you have any best practices or tips for doing group interviews on a video chat like Zoom?
Some of it will be the same as what we've shared here. The eye contact will be a little different because if you're trying to look to each one, you can do that. My suggestion for group interviews is having their name, knowing whose name is with what face. So that's why I get the names in advance. Hopefully their names are on their screen so that when you're answering a question, you can say, Mike, thank you so much for that question. Answer it. You can address them by name. If you have a question, you could say, you know, Nancy, I really appreciate you sharing XYZ. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. So calling them by name and either addressing them for the answer or the question will help make it a lot more personalized.
It's a good tip.
It also helps that not everyone will chime in. Like if you have a question, you don't want everyone chiming in.
Right. Another question here, is it okay to ask for interview feedback in the thank you email?
Interview feedback in the thank you email, you can phrase it in a way that asks for, if you'd like more information, happy to hop on another call. I might not ask for, how did I come off? Because that's probably not something that they're going to answer. Keep it as positive as you can, express your interest and your value, and ask for the next meeting. If you had an HR individual or recruiter that was your go-between, you could ask them, hey, I'd love to know if you've received any feedback from the interviewers. I believe I share my experience well. If there's any additional questions that they have, or if you have any feedback, love to hear it. Not directly to the interviewers, though.
Right. Just my own thoughts on that too. If you follow up to thank someone for the interview and ask, how did I come across? It might strike them as you lacking confidence in how you came across if you're looking for feedback. So probably not the person you directly interviewed with, probably not the right time to ask for that feedback.
Right. I think that's a great way of saying it, not the right time and person at the time.
Right. We also, another question here, should you keep your answers high level or delve into details?
I think that's a case-by-case basis. Some questions really warrant some detail, some don't. If you're not quite sure, you can start with high level and then ask them, I have more information on that if you like, or I have a specific story around that, I can share it if you like. And you can almost ask them, would you like more information, or can I give you more? But I might base it on the specific question and whether you feel like it warrants an example. So a little case by case on that.
Question we got in here is, if using an external camera and you have the option to look down at the camera or to the side, is one preferable? Should I let the interviewer know in advance about this tech issue?
About this tech issue?
Mm-hmm.
If you have, what's great about this whole virtual world that we're living in now, everyone's sort of open with a lot of things that can happen. So you can be very forthcoming prior, if you know, or in the beginning of your call, if you didn't know prior, what issues may impact the call. I just received a new webcam, so excuse me, this is the first time I wanted to replace it, make sure I had a better visual experience here. If you see any glitches, please let me know. If you're using the camera over here, just making you aware, I've got my camera on a tripod, so I'm looking at you from this direction. You can certainly, don't apologize, but you certainly can give them a little heads up of any unique situation that you think might impact their viewing experience, but only if you think it's going to impact it. That's why the prep before and testing before can help you know if it's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I love your advice there, Lisa, to not apologize for these things. Because I think, and especially now, it's funny, we're in a situation now where a few months ago, maybe it would have seemed a little different. But today, because the world is so virtual in the light of the pandemic, everyone seems to be more understanding of one another's challenges. And we all seem to acknowledge that there are some tech issues that anyone might run across. So yeah, you're right. No need to apologize. But just being open and transparent is the way to be.
Absolutely. And that's also the human side of things, right? So being understanding, and there are more understanding, the recruiters are, so great.
Right. Point. On that same thread, someone asked, let's see here. Someone asked if a person interviewing is at a bad angle, is it okay to inform them or better to ignore?
I would say it would depend on how bad it is. If it's impacting where you're looking or it's kind of distracting, it's okay to mention it. You can say, first of all, I always like to start things off with a positive comment and then a constructive element. So you could share, I really appreciate you answer that question. I am having a little challenge hearing you. Could you possibly raise your volume? Or, I have my volume up, but I'm having a little challenge hearing you. Or, thank you so much for that question. I'm going to be answering in a moment. I can't quite see you. I think maybe either the lighting or the position of your chair. Would you mind shifting? If you ask it politely, you can do that. Only if it's really distracting enough.
Yeah, I think going back to what I said earlier about how audio tends to be the most important factor, I think that if you have an audio issue and can't understand the interviewer, that's probably an essential thing to clear up at the beginning,
Right.
even more so than the video component. Let's see,
They
we have,
should be aware of how they appear, because everyone right now, you see how you appear, so they should know if it's, I just see their eyes or their head, if they're tech savvy at all. But if you only see eyes or you only see chin, that's worth mentioning.
yeah. We got a few more questions here, so we'll try to tackle them all. Someone said, do you find it a common practice for interviewers not to answer thank you notes so that they don't give an indication what they think of you during the process while evaluating other candidates?
Yes, and that's often the reason. And sometimes it's merely that they are busy. I would expect not getting an answer to a thank you. First of all, it doesn't really warrant a response. It's like I said, happy birthday, thank you, you're welcome, thank you. Like, you just can't keep going back and forth. So once you send out that thank you, assume they got it. You could actually, again, with the HR person, write them an email, let them know, thank you for setting this up. I sent so-and-so a follow-up email. You don't have to say thank you, follow-up email. If they didn't get it, please let me know. Other than that, just assume they are not going to respond.
Another question here, is it okay to start with small talk? How are they doing? Talk about the weather briefly.
Sure, that's the human side of things. Hope you're doing well today. Were you able to get out this weekend? If you happen to see something in their background, oh, I see you're a Yankees fan. I bet you're hoping that they come back and play some sports in the next couple of months. One or two questions, just don't labor on it. Make sure they take it to the next step if they want to ask more personal. But one or two questions, absolutely.
Another
I
question
actually suggest that so you feel like I'm having a personal connection, and then we start the meeting.
Yeah, it's probably a good way to kick things off, just to a human interaction, before the questions.
And it sort of breaks down that wall. When we're in an in-person interview, this whole desk is like this dome in between us that we can't it's a barrier. The interview, the camera, this whole screen is like a barrier. By having a one or two personalized questions in the beginning about their weekend, about their travels, what have you, it kind of breaks down that wall and says, all right, we're about to have a conversation here. So I think that's a helpful strategy.
Someone asks, what information are recruiters mostly interested in candidates these days? For example, social media savvy, et cetera.
Well, the three most common questions, these are just the most common, and they're asked in different ways, but basically, tell me about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why should I hire you? Those are your biggest three. Tell me about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why should I hire you? Other basic questions. Why do you want to work here? What are some of your weaknesses? They don't ask it that way, but they may ask you, what do you think you need to learn? So those are some basics. Beyond that, I would expect questions that have to do with the job and your personality, because they're going to look to see, do they have these skills and experience, but do you also fit our culture in terms of maybe how you think or the process and how you solve problems. So use the role, the job description, and whatever you find out about the company as a guide of what questions you should expect.
We got another question here that says, if you interviewed for a position prior to COVID and talent acquisition called to say that the position is paused indefinitely, is it okay to email the interviewers? How would you send a follow-up thank you email in hopes that they remember you when the hiring pause has been lifted?
Yeah, great question. I just had this question the other day, and you can absolutely follow up with that. So if for some reason it's been put on hold, if you got that as an email, respond fairly quickly. Thanks so much for letting me know. I'm sure these are challenging times. I look forward to connecting with you in the coming weeks. Okay. In a few weeks, if you haven't heard, use that second follow-up method that I mentioned by sending an email with added value. Hi, hope you're doing well. I happened to check out this article that relates to XYZ. Thought you might be interested in it. Have a great weekend. So it's a follow-up, not about the job. So when is the next steps? How's it going? I wouldn't really dive into that. If they want to and they're ready, they'll call you. If you want to stay in the running, reach out every few weeks with article information, etc., that gives them a reason to remember you and want to call back. Right? So make it about them.
Yeah, it's a good way to let them know you're still interested in the position too, and to stay top of mind for them.
And that you're not just waiting around for their call. We don't want to put off that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key thing to imagine. And you don't want to be just waiting for them. So you're looking at other job opportunities and you're doing more interviews. But really come at it with value, so it doesn't look like that you're desperate or you just have no other things going on. You know?
This might be one of the last questions we tackle now.
Sure.
Is it okay to connect and send the thank you note to the interviewer on LinkedIn?
That's been some fun debate that I hear online most of the time, and this is my opinion on it, is that save your LinkedIn outreach for after you either got the job or were turned down for the job. So if the recruiter reached out to you or the hiring manager reached out to you on LinkedIn, you could send your thank you email there because you're already connected. But if you are not connected, then use email. It's really not appropriate to send a LinkedIn request to someone you're interviewing with during the process. So again, if you've connected with them before and setting up the interview, then yes, you can continue some conversation there. Otherwise, you wait until you find out that you've accepted the position. Great, now you can connect with some colleagues, but I'd wait at least a few months. If they said, oh, we thank you, went with another candidate, okay, understood that, wish you the best of luck. And then you can turn that into a networking prospect. So they can check out our networking webinar from a few weeks ago. Great, yes. To take on those tips.
Yes. Let's see. We have one more question that just came in. So let's tackle that one. If you are not active on social media, can this work against you in the interview process if the topic comes up?
Well, it depends on what social media that you feel that organization wants you to be active on. So you may want to check out their social media page and see how active they are on it. It doesn't mean that you have to have tremendous activity on Facebook and Twitter. I would definitely focus a lot of your media attention on LinkedIn. That's your professional networking in medium.
Mm-hmm.
The Twitter and this Facebook, I think it's best that if you're going to be active on it at all, that you keep it non-personal. And what I mean is, don't keep sharing out messages about what you had for lunch and how you hate this person and my job search stinks and all this. I would actually do less activity about that. You want to post an article that's of interest, that's fine. Careful about your pictures that you post, because if you're on Twitter and Facebook, whether you're private or not, consider the public watching you. So I'd actually step back a little bit on the social media and mind your digital dirt.
Yeah, I would recommend too that you should probably have some presence on LinkedIn. Companies like to be able to look you up and see that you're a real person who's, who matches up to what they see and expect. Yeah. So I think LinkedIn's a great place to be. And, your questions about social media, even if the position is one that involves social media, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be super open and transparent with your personal use of social media. I've found that they don't really judge you by your personal social media, even for jobs that require you to be active on social media, from a corporate perspective. Yeah,
you could have, if you had a blog where you're posting some articles and writing your own couple of 100-word articles there, that's social media in and of itself. If you want to show that you have value and comments about professional topics or of the heart topics, but keeping some of that emotional piece out of it. And to your point about LinkedIn, more than 92% of HR managers and recruiters use LinkedIn to connect with and vet candidates. So get your LinkedIn profile up and running with purpose, with value, clean, clear, compelling, interesting. It's definitely worth its time because they're looking at your page quite often, either after you send your resume in or before they call you, or before they even call you. So LinkedIn works for you while you sleep. And if you want to know a little bit more about how recruiters are viewing LinkedIn and other areas, you can check my website, careersadvance.org. I do have a webinar that I just put up there on my YouTube channel on the executive job market. We have 4 recruiters that shared a lot of tips and strategies, and it's not just applicable to executives, but how to sort of connect with recruiters on the digital world.
Yeah, and in regards to LinkedIn, even if you're working in a field where LinkedIn is not as common, like, I have friends who work in publishing and other industries where it's not quite as common to necessarily have an active LinkedIn. Even if you don't check your LinkedIn that much, it's good to just sort of plant your flag there and to have a presence. So I would always recommend that.
I have a lot of clients who are teachers and they're not active on LinkedIn and they're usually in their journey for a long time. I have folks that are, clients that are nurses and just all kinds of industries that, yeah, I don't necessarily use LinkedIn a lot, but you want to have a digital presence because first of all, you can be found that way. And second of all, when you did want to reach out, that platform is there ready for you. So it's not about being on it 24/7, but it's about having a professional, robust appearance, presence, if you will, so that you can be found and found with interest.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like in today's day and age, if you search for someone online and they have no social media presence, it's almost weird. It's like, ooh, why can't I find anything about this person? So it's funny how things have changed like that.
Yeah, it's not that you have to be an expert in the technology, but without a LinkedIn presence, you look as if you have no tech experience, and that can really go against you, especially if you're sort of, if you're just starting out in your career, if you're way down at the end of your experienced career, it can give off a non-tech vibe, which can hurt you.
Yeah. And speaking of LinkedIn, I'm going to share in the chat my own LinkedIn. Everybody feel free to connect with me after this webinar. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. We had 60 alumni on the call. So it's fantastic. Thank you, Lisa, for this presentation. Everyone, I am going to send out a recording of this following it up. So you will be able to refer back to that. And we do have some more events coming up down the line. We have a workshop series starting on Thursday from our Graduate Career Management Center that's doing a 4-part workshop about sort of how to turn this odd period into a way to help your career. We have another webinar with Lisa next week. That's going to be about 360-degree branding and how to really improve your employability during this odd period. And I will definitely send a link to for you to sign up for that in our follow-up email. And we also have other alumni events as well. We have one coming up that's going to be about alumni in the restaurant industry who'll be talking about how the pandemic has impacted that. We have a number of other events down the line as well. So we'll keep you posted about all those. So thanks again for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. I look forward to being in touch, and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. I just said thank you to everyone in the chat. Really great having you on this call. Your time and energy made this presentation a huge success. So be well and feel free to keep in touch. Thanks, Greg, Cindy.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of your night.
Take care.